Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Our presentation is titled Ethical Reasoning and the Use of Lethal Force, where we will explore the complex considerations involved in defending the innocent through critical ethical analysis. As we delve into this important topic, we'll be examining the balance between justice and morality, symbolized here by the scales you see on the slide. I look forward to guiding you through this thought-provoking discussion. Here, we begin our introduction to ethical reasoning by exploring three key concepts that help guide our decision-making. First, we have duties, which remind us to consider our moral obligations and responsibilities before making any choices. This is about understanding what we are required to do ethically, and it's symbolized here by the brain, reflecting thoughtful consideration. Next, we look at consequences, encouraging us to evaluate the outcomes and effects of the actions we take. This helps us weigh the potential impact on ourselves and others, illustrated by the balanced scale icon. Lastly, we have virtues, which invite us to reflect on the character traits and moral values that guide our behavior, represented by the heart icon. Together, these concepts provide a comprehensive framework for ethical reasoning, helping us navigate complex situations thoughtfully and responsibly. Here we're comparing three major ethical frameworks that help us evaluate the use of force. First up is utilitarianism, which is all about assessing actions based on their outcomes. The main idea is to achieve the greatest good for the greatest number. So when it comes to using force, we weigh the potential benefits against the harm it might cause. Moving on to deontology, this framework emphasizes duties and moral rules. It holds that certain actions, like the use of lethal force, are governed by strict ethical principles regardless of the consequences. This means some uses of force could be deemed right or wrong based on adherence to these rules alone. Lastly, virtue ethics focuses on the character and virtues of the person making decisions, rather than just rules or outcomes. It asks us to consider what a morally good person would do, highlighting qualities like courage, compassion, and wisdom in deciding when and how force is used. The image of the balance scale with question marks symbolizes the uncertainty and careful judgment required when applying these frameworks in real situations. When we talk about understanding defense of the innocent, it's important to start with defining what defense really means. Essentially, it's about protecting vulnerable individuals from harm through justified actions. This involves not only ensuring their safety, but also embracing a moral responsibility to act when someone can't defend themselves. That's our duty to protect. Next, defense must be legitimate. This means any act of defense should be justified and proportionate, setting it apart from aggression or harm done without just cause. It's crucial that defense is not confused with excessive force or unwarranted violence. Finally, there are clear limits to protection. Defense should have boundaries to avoid escalating conflicts unnecessarily or provoking further harm. It's about finding a balance, standing firm when necessary, but knowing when to restrain actions to prevent making things worse. This image here of a hand holding a transparent face shield beautifully symbolizes this concept, offering protection while being clear and measured, just like defense of the innocent should be. When discussing when lethal force is justified, the first and most critical point is the presence of an imminent threat. This means that force is only justified when there is an immediate danger to life or serious injury. It's a scenario where hesitation could result in severe harm or death. Next, we have the principle of necessity. Lethal force should only be used when there is no less harmful option available. It must be absolutely necessary to protect life. Following that, proportionality is essential. The response must not exceed the level of threat posed. The use of force should be balanced and appropriate to the situation. Finally, lethal force is truly a last resort, considered only after all other measures have failed or are unavailable. This principle ensures that such serious action is taken only when everything else has been exhausted. Together, these points form the framework for responsible and ethical use of lethal force. Here we have two fundamental principles, proportionality and necessity. Proportionality means that the force used must match the level of the threat. It should never go beyond what's needed to handle the situation effectively. This ensures that actions are balanced and justifiable. Necessity, on the other hand, emphasizes that force should only be applied when there are no less harmful options available, or when no other feasible alternatives exist. Both principles work together to guide responsible and ethical decision-making in situations requiring force. The image of the antique scale here symbolizes the careful balance these principles demand, reminding us that justice requires measured and thoughtful action. Here we have a real-world case study focusing on the police use of lethal force. On the left, you can see a stark black and white image of a cityscape at night, highlighting the urban environment where the incident took place. Starting with the case summary, an armed suspect posed a threat to bystanders in this urban area. Police officers responded after a timed assessment of the situation, ultimately engaging the suspect. Unfortunately, this resulted in the suspect being fatally shot. On the right, the facts table provides a clear breakdown of the incident. The suspect was actively threatening the public, prompting the police to respond following their established protocol with measured escalation. Importantly, despite the lethal outcome for the suspect, no bystanders were harmed during the event. This carefully controlled response underscores the complexity and seriousness of such critical situations. Here we have a horizontal bar chart that compares different ethical theories based on how much emphasis they place on various ethical aspects. The three key aspects highlighted here are outcomes, rules, and character. As you can see, outcomes receive the highest emphasis, scoring a full 100. This suggests that certain ethical approaches strongly prioritize the consequences of actions when making judgments. Rules come next, with an emphasis level of 65, meaning that some theories focus on adhering to established principles or duties. Lastly, character is emphasized at a level of 60, indicating that other perspectives value the moral character or virtues of the individual involved. Overall, this chart helps us understand how different ethical theories weigh these aspects differently, which is crucial when analyzing the case study. It shows that outcomes are considered the most critical factor in this context, but rules and character still play significant roles in guiding ethical decisions. Here we have a hypothetical moral dilemma that resembles the classic trolley problem, but in a real-world defense context. On one side, there's a threat to many. Imagine a crowded public space where an imminent attack could endanger numerous innocent lives. This is represented by the user icon and reflects the scale of potential harm to a large group of people gathered together. On the other side, we have the defender's choice, focusing on a single targeted individual. Here, force can be used to stop the attacker, represented by the shield icon, but it raises questions about intervening directly. This scenario challenges us to weigh the value of many lives against the actions taken to protect them by potentially using force on one. The image helps us visualize the crowded area, emphasizing the complexity and urgency of such decisions in public safety. Here we explore three essential ethical frameworks and how they guide decision-making in challenging situations. First, the utilitarian approach focuses on maximizing overall well-being. It's about choosing the option that saves the greatest number of lives by carefully balancing the benefits against the potential risks involved. Think of it as aiming for the greatest good for the greatest number. Next, the deontological framework insists on strictly following moral rules and duties, no matter the outcome. It emphasizes respect for rights and upholding ethical principles, even if the consequences aren't ideal. In other words, doing what's right takes precedence over what results might be. Finally, virtue ethics highlights the importance of acting courageously and with integrity. This perspective centers on the moral character of the individual making decisions, focusing on virtues like honesty and bravery, rather than specific rules or outcomes. Each framework offers a unique lens to navigate complex ethical choices, helping us weigh actions from different but complementary moral standpoints. When it comes to ethical decision-making, one of the biggest challenges we face is dealing with uncertainty and incomplete information. Often, we have to make choices with only partial facts or unclear details. This makes it difficult to fully understand the situation and predict the consequences of our decisions. It's like trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces. It forces us to rely on judgment and intuition, which can be tricky when moral stakes are high. This image here really captures that feeling of distress and contemplation that often accompanies these tough moments. Recognizing this challenge is crucial because it shapes how we approach split-second moral choices and highlights the importance of careful reflection despite the pressure. Here, we're looking at how consequences and moral responsibility are closely connected when it comes to lethal force. The outcomes of an action significantly influence how we morally evaluate those actions. Whether harm was done or lives were saved, these results shape responsibility. Equally important is the agent's intent and what consequences were predictable. Moral responsibility hinges not just on what happened, but also on what the person intended and what they could reasonably foresee. This balance between outcomes and intentions ultimately guides our ethical judgments in these complex situations. When we talk about balancing rights and duties in defense, it's important to first understand what these terms really mean. Starting with rights, these are fundamental protections everyone has. Key among them is the right to life and bodily integrity, which means every individual has the right to be safe and to have their autonomy respected, especially in situations involving defense. On the other side, we have duties, which refer to responsibilities like protecting citizens and strictly following legal frameworks. Those who take on defense roles must act responsibly and ethically, ensuring their actions are just and lawful. Balancing these rights and duties is crucial to maintaining fairness and security in any defense context. Here, we summarize the ethical guidelines for the use of lethal force, focusing on 6 critical principles. First, imminence means force is only justified if the threat is immediate and unavoidable. Next, necessity requires that lethal force be used only when no effective alternative exists. Proportionality emphasizes that the level of force must match the seriousness of the threat. Last resort highlights that lethal force should be a final option after all other measures have been exhausted. Accountability calls for all actions to be documented and subject to review to ensure responsibility. Finally, transparency ensures that decisions and justifications for using force are clear and open to scrutiny. Together, these guidelines provide a framework to ensure ethical and responsible use of lethal force. As we wrap up, let's focus on the key takeaways. First, under frameworks, ethical reasoning requires balancing different perspectives: utilitarian, deontological, and virtue ethics to make thoughtful decisions. Moving on to constraints, real-world uncertainty and time pressure significantly impact how decisions are made in critical situations. Next, guidelines emphasize that the use of force must always be guided by principles of imminence, necessity, and proportionality to ensure appropriate responses. Finally, responsibility reminds us that defenders must carefully consider accountability and the consequences of their actions. Together, these points highlight the importance of teamwork and collaboration, just like the image here illustrates, showing how coordinated effort is essential in applying these ethical principles effectively.